So the sources of the respiratory hazards are pretty much the same, but the circumstances in which they occur are different. So for bus operators, as distinguished from mechanics, you have the idling of the buses, you have the operation of the buses in traffic, etc. For the mechanics, you have the work operations in the depot in addition to the idling. So this, it's clearly the same source, the same issues, but the circumstances under which they occur have some similarities and some differences. First of all, there's brake work, which may or may not contain asbestos, but certainly has a variety of potentially respirable particulate hazards. There are vehicle emissions, the primary components of which would be diesel emissions and carbon monoxide. All of these have associated questions with adequacy of ventilation, and ventilation can take or should take several forms, ranging from the least effective, which is natural ventilation, which is basically the depot doors being open to the elements. Then you have general or comfort or dilution ventilation, which would be facility ventilation in general. And then you have what's called local exhaust ventilation, and which is right at the point of production, right at the source of the hazards or the emissions. A primary example of that in a depot would be tailpipe emission hoses. For transit, based on my experience, the real issues are both what are the hazards and the sources and the seriousness of the hazards, but also what can be done to control them. And I think a major issue in transit is an over-reliance on personal protective equipment at best. Sometimes we don't even get as far as personal protective equipment, and an under-reliance or an under-emphasis on control of hazard at the source. So in many circumstances, transit, like not unlike other employers, tends to have a heavy reliance on personal protective equipment. Sometimes there's a need for personal protective equipment and workers don't get it. Other times, while it might be appropriate to use personal protective equipment, a more appropriate and a more effective solution might be further up in what's called the hierarchy of controls through use of ventilation or through use of substitution of less toxic materials than others. And I think, in these regards, in terms of the hierarchy of controls, transit would benefit greatly from an increased reliance on ventilation and other controls, and a decreased reliance on personal protective equipment, where that's feasible. Well, there's the obvious issue that everybody knows about and talks about, which is steel dust, which is sort of a non-specific, under-researched issue. But the basic issue in underground work and transit is respirable particulates, which is basically particulate matter suspended in air and available for inhalation, regardless of the chemical content or source of origin. If the particulates are small enough to be respirable, that is, if they can bypass the body defenses in the upper respiratory system and thereby get deep into the lungs, they have the potential for doing damage regardless of their origin or regardless of their chemical composition. So in a dirty system, with a lot of friction sources and a variety of materials ranging from steel on steel to asbestos to lead to the particulate component of diesel emissions, you have a lot of sources and a lot of potential exposure on the particulate end. Workers have two basic definitions for steel dust. One is the more narrowly focused, targeted definition, which says it's the particulates produced by the friction of steel wheels on steel rails. And the more general definition that a lot of people use, it's all the crap that's in the system, including steel dust, but ground up rodents, possibly asbestos, soot, and a variety of other things. Either category certainly, is not beneficial to human health. But our knowledge our actual knowledge, factually, of steel dust is pretty limited. It's been very limited research. New York City Transit as an agency has let's say, has not been enthusiastic about collaborating in additional research on this issue. We're always concerned about fixing the hazards, but most importantly, and the top priority, of course, is if anybody is having health impact or feels they're having health impact from any of these kinds of exposures, if there, I have two things to say about that briefly. First, if it's work-related, the medical component of that should not be the transit system. It should not be health benefits, but should be workers' compensation. And second is that there are, excellent, superb occupational and environmental health clinics. The premier one of which in New York City is the Mount Sinai Selikoff Clinic, and workers should go there. The union can help them get there, and that's where they'll get the best diagnosis, the best treatment, and the best understanding and ability to link workplace issues and workplace hazards with actual health impact.